Madam Speaker, this is a co-sponsored bill, and I'm proud of the fact that this is probably the first of its kind in the history of our parliament, the 12th parliament. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the Disaster Risk Management Bill, Senate Bill number 8 of 2018, be now read a second time. Madam Speaker, this bill was published on the 6th of March 2018 and read for the first time in this House on the 18th of April 2018. Madam Speaker, the disaster that has been disaster management in Kenya is what has really caused us, together with Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr., to think of what the best legislative framework for dealing with disaster management in our country should be. Madam Speaker, even just today, a lot of the statements that have been raised and discussed on the floor of this House have had to do with disasters and the management of disasters. We're talking about the Gikomba fire, statement raised by Senator Mary Senator. We've spoken about the issues of flood management in Machakos County. And Madam Speaker, every day we're dealing with different types of disasters. Madam Speaker, this bill seeks to establish the National Disaster Risk Management Authority that will ensure there is coordination of disaster risk management issues at the national level as well as at the county level. The bill further seeks to establish county disaster risk management committees in each of the counties, as the role of disaster management is a shared function. If you go to the 4th schedule of our constitution, it's a function that is shared between both the national government and the county government. Madam Speaker, our country has been exposed to a variety of both natural and technological disasters, such as fires. We've had droughts, floods, landslides, building collapsing. The buildings have really collapsed in Nairobi County. Traffic accidents, oil spills, industrial accidents, diseases, epidemics, terror attacks, and many others. These disasters have adverse socio-economic, health, and political impacts in our society and in our country. They have disrupted livelihoods, they have destroyed infrastructure, they have cost us lives, they have diverted planned use of resources, they have interrupted economic activities, and they have retarded development in our country. Madam Speaker, if we just look at fires alone, for instance, we've had a series of school fires in the past few years that have affected so many of our schools. We've lost lives. And we know that our schools do not have capacity to implement safety standards and to deal with these fires. Just recently, we lost as a country a number of girls at Moi Girls School, Nairobi, because of a fire incident. And it's not the first that has happened in this country. Madam Speaker, in 2009, a petrol tanker burst into flames in Sachangwan. 91 Kenyans died, 178 got thermal injuries and were burnt, and their lives would change forever. Madam Speaker, in 2009 as well, January, just down the road, a few meters from where we are today, uncovered gas cylinders exploded and smoldered and burnt at Nakumat, costing us lives, causing injuries, and causing damage to property that has been irreparable till today. Madam Speaker, just last week, we've lost 15 Kenyans in the county of Nairobi, in Gikomba, because of a fire incident. A few weeks ago, maybe a month or two, we've lost 47 Kenyans at Solai because of a flood disaster. 2 years ago, again, I lost 51 residents of Nairobi at Huruma after a building collapse. I think the extent of the problem really behooves us as a house, as the Senate of the Republic of Kenya, as the Parliament of Kenya, to think of solutions. In all of these disasters, the response has been poorly coordinated, leading to duplication of efforts and wasteful use of resources, in addition to exposing the victims of such disasters to further risks and further dangers and slower recovery. Many, after road accidents, have had their spines injured further because of untrained people trying to evacuate and move their bodies from the scenes of accidents. Others have gotten injured while being evacuated from buildings that have collapsed or that have come under different disasters. Madam Speaker, people living in informal settlements, especially in urban areas and semi-arid lands, arid and semi-arid lands, are particularly vulnerable when it comes to disasters because their abilities to deal at a civic level and to cope with these disasters are constrained or limited and require greater investment in the systems of managing disaster. Disaster response reviews of the few that we've been able to look at have indicated that the response costs more than would otherwise be the case if sufficient efforts had been put in place for effective disaster management. And you must realize, Madam Speaker, even as we discuss this bill, that disaster management and disaster risk management does not happen after the disaster has happened. It begins from the planning and from early warning signals and from preventing the disasters. The prevention costs much less than what we need to do once the disasters have taken place. Our country, Kenya, has submitted an action plan to the United Nations Climate Change Conference held in December 2015 in Paris. And according to that action plan, Madam Speaker, droughts and floods alone cost us economic losses estimated at 3% of our country's GDP. Madam Speaker, you know what it takes to increase a country's GDP by 1%. But the effect of disasters has cost us, and not all disasters, just floods and droughts have cost us 3% of our GDP in economic losses. Madam Speaker, part of the problem that we're dealing with is that we have various agencies that undertake different activities related to disaster management, search and rescue, first aid services and evacuation, anti-terrorism, surveillance, law enforcement and crowd control, peace building, conflict resolution operations, and firefighting. However, the bane of our problem and really a large part of what we're solving in this bill is the fact that these institutions are housed in different ministries and many times duplicate their efforts. They include the National Disaster Operations Center, NDOC, the National Disaster Management Unit, NDMU, the National Drought Management Agency, NDMA, under the Directorate of Special Programs. Indeed, it is extremely difficult to get definitive answers on where these agencies' mandates begin and end. They have varying budgets, they have different leadership, many times they fight tough wars. And Madam Speaker, many times their fights on turf have cost, and I'm saying this because I have been there and I've seen it. Many times the turf wars have cost us lives and have reduced our response time to disaster management. Madam Speaker, 2 years ago, I remember at around midnight, must have been the month of April, I received a phone call in 2016 that there had been a building that had collapsed in Nairobi County in Mathare. 1 hour later, Madam Speaker, because once I got the news, I moved from where I was, I went home, switched it on. 2016, I was not yet an elected leader in Nairobi, and I thought in my mind that somebody will be dealing with that issue. But when I switched on my television set, I saw the mess that was happening in Mathare in Huruma. Madam Speaker, I went to the site, and for 1 entire hour in Huruma, these agencies were fighting over who has the mandate to be in charge of the rescue efforts, who will lead the rescue efforts, while residents were trapped under a building, a 7-story building that had been put up in under 5 months that housed hundreds of innocent Nairobians, innocent Kenyans. Madam Speaker, the young people of Mathare and Huruma actually were considering chasing away these agencies, and they themselves, using ill-equipment, they were ill-equipped, using the torches on their phones, using crude equipment, went in, and I must credit the young people of Nairobi because not just in that incident, but in many others, they saved lives until these agencies got their act in order. Madam Speaker, I stayed there overnight in Mathare, just less than 200 meters from the NYS, one of the NYS barracks with a lot of equipment. It is sad that throughout the night, I, as a citizen, had to fuel the generator. In the morning, I had to buy personally the cutting machines to cut through the steel for those who are rescuing. I had to buy milk and bread for those who are supporting those efforts. Yet we had the military, we had NYS, we had the police, we had the county government, the previous county government. Madam Speaker, that picture has never left my mind. Carrying dead bodies of more than 10 children who did not deserve to die has never left my mind. The story of a gentleman who told me that when the first tremor happened, he told his children to wait so that he could go outside and remove some of the little furniture that he had in the house, a table, 2 buckets and a stool. And that the moment he stepped out of the gate, the building came down and he lost his children. Has never left my mind. Madam Speaker, the response to these disasters has shown us the inequality in this country. One, if such a disaster happened in affluent areas, I think the whole of KDF would be there. Business would stop in this country. But we are used to, because it is Mathare, because it is Ruai, because it is an informal settlement, it will be dealt with. The response has always been inadequate. Madam Speaker, the care we give these people after these incidents happen has been inadequate. Till today, Madam Speaker, I'm paying fees for orphaned children from the Mathare incident, from Mlango Kubwa, Huruma, where there was a fire a few months ago. And no government agency sees the need to take care of these people a week, not even a month, a week after these incidents have happened. Madam Speaker, during different disasters that have recently visited our country, it appears as if these institutions and organizations, and it pains me to talk about institutions of government, and I come from the government side, the majority side that has formed government. But it shows the pain, Madam Speaker, that really all Kenyans, whether they're in Jubilee, whether they're in NASA, are facing in the face of disasters. It seems like these agencies have their own interests and allegiances that are more powerful than the incentives for collaboration between them and partnerships. Even getting them many times around one table has been difficult. The disaster response activities have been poorly coordinated due to lack of SOPs, standard operating procedures, and disaster emergency operation plans. And the existing institutional framework is heavily weighted towards emergency responses, giving little time and inadequate emphasis to long-term preventative measures and mitigation. Madam Speaker, the lack of standardized operating procedures can cost lives. It has cost lives. My friend, the late Munene, an officer of GSU, during the Westgate attack, was killed by the KDF. Both security officers of our country, both at the scene of a crime, trying to rescue Kenyans under fire of friendly fire. And we lost one of the most valiant and gallant Kenyan servicemen that I have known. Madam Speaker. I am glad that after that incident, the security forces have had better inter-agency cooperation, and these days they even do some training together to resolve and to sort out such incidences. But one life lost is one life too many. Many others have lost. Madam Speaker, on top of the lack of coordination, multiple actors and approaches make efficiency in prevention and mitigation too difficult to achieve. Additionally, these agencies are confronted with limited budgetary allocations and also face challenges associated with cumbersome procurement processes and availability of specialized equipment for effective disaster management interventions. Madam Speaker, you'll be shocked to know, and I know you're a professor, that in this entire country, in the case of a biochemical attack, it is only the Kenya Red Cross that is equipped to respond and to save lives, and even the equipment they have is limited to just a few, actually tens of people. In case of a biochemical attack in this country, we put resources onto other things and end up spending much more when it comes to rebuilding after the disaster has happened. Data collection and storage is not uniformly adequate, and this inadequacy has also resulted in poor planning, lack of institutional memory, lack of effective monitoring, and evaluation of disaster risk trend analysis and forecasts. So, Madam Speaker, what we're doing with this bill, number one is that we're bringing together the staff under the NDOC, the National Disaster Operations Center, the National Disaster Management Unit, the Department of Special Programs, under the auspices of the proposed National Disaster Management Authority. The main premise is to approach disaster risk management in a manner that seeks first to respond effectively and timely to any disaster or risk of a disaster, and secondly, to prevent the adverse effects of disaster and recover as far many as possible the livelihoods of communities affected by disasters. And I know Senator Mutula, when he is also moving, will talk about the preventative measures and the early warning signals that we require. I hope their timing may have only 30 minutes. Then Mutula's the rest. Madam Speaker, under the fourth schedule, this is a function of both national and county governments. Counties are expected to be the first responders in case of a disaster in the county. However, there's been no mechanism to implement this function at the county level and to coordinate between the national and county government. This bill provides a framework for the coordination and also for the resourcing to address these gaps. Enactment will assist in efficient and effective management of disasters across the country. Madam Speaker, our counties are playing around when it comes to disasters. They are allocating very little resources, and many times, you know, the percentage that has been uniform across the country has been used to siphon funds from public coffers. Because you say they have X% for emergency response. Madam Speaker, let me give you the example of Nairobi. I think other senators can talk about their counties. Out of a budget of 32 billion that has just been passed in Nairobi County, 32 billion. The amount of money that has been set aside for fire and disaster management is 162 million. And that is recurrent. The development budget for fire and disaster management in Nairobi County is 10 million shillings. Out of a budget of 32 billion. A county that is most affected by disasters. Every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. We are joking. We must get serious. The same county, after putting 10 million shillings for development for disasters, has 129 million shillings for a budget item called news and information. You know, I have very able MCAs in Nairobi, but I don't know where they were when this budget passed. How do you put 129 million shillings for news and information? What news? Are you subscribing to one part of CNN or BBC? Yet you put 10 million for development expenditure on disaster management, Madam Speaker, and 162 million for development on the same. Madam Speaker, we need to align the budgets and the investments in disaster. Recently, I happened to be in Canada, Vancouver, together with Senator Dulo, Senator Wetangula, and a few other senators, and we saw the kind of investment that has been put in disaster management. The call centers. Today, if a disaster happened, I'm sure none of you knows which phone number to call in Nairobi when a disaster happens. What about the citizens? Yet you are the enlightened leaders. Madam Speaker, in Gikomba, for example, if there was a fire station close to Gikomba, a place where we know every 4 months there are attempts to burn, we'd have saved lives, Madam Speaker. If we had codebacks, because many times the excuse has been that there is no access in many of the informal settlements, then what are you doing about it if there's no access? Provide. Make sure you have alleyways. And even as you do that, get quad bikes that have water at the back, Madam Speaker. We do not want to see fire engines only on Labor Day being paraded to Kenyans and to Nairobians. We want to see fire engines across the city. We want to see ambulance services across the city and across our country. Madam Speaker, that investment must be made. So this bill provides the framework through which we will have counties investing properly and coordinating. Too many people, Madam Speaker, who are charged with dealing with disasters only meet at the scene of disasters. Madam Speaker, the NDOC, the NDMA, the county government, the county inspectorate, the police and the military only meet when there's a fire in Kijiji in Langata, when there's a flood in Solai, when a building has gone down in Ruma. Yet they should be meeting, and we've created the structure institutionally of the County Disaster Management Committee and the National Disaster Management Authority, where they will be frequently sitting down to evaluate these risks and to mitigate these risks. Madam Speaker, I will urge senators, and I beg my colleagues, to support this bill as we bring some sanity. Kenyans have asked, what are you doing? You always go to Gikomba, you always fast to respond when there's a fire, and I kept telling them, even online, and I think Senator Mutula, he is always online on Twitter to support, that on top of us going there to support directly, we have brought a bill that will provide the legislative framework to deal with issues of disaster so that it is not business as usual, especially in our urban areas and in our arid areas in this country. And so I'm asking senators to support this, to make sure that we pass this legislation, and to make sure that it is implemented once it is the law. Madam Speaker, I think that is my time. I beg, so do I move half? Or do I beg to move, and I ask my co-sponsor, and the only thing we co-sponsor is bills, but I will ask my co-sponsor to come and also move on his side. Thank you, Madam Speaker.